How's it going, everybody? It's Shaun here with another edition of Shaun Solo. So earlier today I put up a video which was kind of my basic review, spoiler-free review of Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. But as I said in that video, I would like to talk about the story, because that is a big reason why I play these games. I like the crazy, convoluted bullshit of that game, you know, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, that's what I go when I'm playing a Metal Gear Solid game. That's a big thing for me. But the thing with Metal Gear Solid 5, I feel like it's like a separate issue, basically. Because if you watch my review, you know I really like that game. So if you haven't watched that and you want to hear a little bit more in depth about like how I felt about the game in general, you can go check that out. But, you know, the short version is, I liked it. I thought it was incredible. As a game, gameplay-wise, mechanically, amazing. Amazing. Kojima has done it, kids. But I did take some issue with the storytelling. Not the story itself. Not totally. I have criticisms about the story. But it wasn't the story. It wasn't even like the message of the story. It was just the way it was told. And it was kind of told in piecemeal. Everything in that story feels very disjointed. And a lot of that has to do with because there's the linearity of the narrative isn't there. Like, you know, basically, I mean, you may feel like this is unfair. I may be judging this unfairly. I'm speaking as a fan of the series that has grew up playing the games and enjoyed kind of the linear narrative. I did, and that was a big draw for me for the games, like I said. So this game takes a different approach, and a lot of that has to do with just the fact, well, it's open world and there's less opportunities, I guess, or. You know, I mean, honestly, I think it's completely reactionary to the kind of age-old criticism of the series, is that, like, oh, these fucking cutscenes, and it's all too long and everything. I mean, I think if you're a Metal Gear Solid fan, you kind of like that stuff. I mean, that's my opinion. I've always enjoyed that aspect of it, honestly, because it's unique. It was unique to itself. And now what we kind of have is more traditional... kind of traditional, like, open world storytelling. But in a more confusing way. Because even if you play, like, open world games, like I name dropped Shadow of Mordor and Far Cry in my review, in terms of mechanics. But it's also, there's a point to be made about the narratives. So, that story is still, those stories are still clearly told. There is no confusion about what those stories are about. You're going to see every major story beat, no matter how you play it. Metal Gear Solid 5, not so much. It's really easy to miss a lot of stuff. Completely miss, like, entire character arcs, motivations, background, history, because they've replaced the codec calls with the cassette tapes, and which you can listen to at your leisure. And those cassette tapes are basically the bulk of the meat of the story. And no, it's not completely, like, ridiculous or annoying that you have to, like, kind of engage with it that way. I felt like it was not organically integrated, and that's when I kind of go back to this kind of, it didn't feel connected, it felt kind of like piecemeal in a weird way, and you were left to stitch things together. Now, that might be able to work if you were telling more of a broader mystery, but this isn't really a mystery story, honestly. It's not. Not in the way it's presented. Like, of course, it asks you questions, like, and you figure things out as the story goes along. You're like, oh, that's why that happened, and that's why that is that way. But it's not, like, a whodunit or something like that. Not in a traditional sense. But if you don't, like, engage the game in a certain way, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. And that's mostly on the Chapter 2, the Part 2, back half of the game. So, I guess, like, just to get into it, let's talk about the big thing. Let's just talk about the ending, the true ending, which, like I said in my review, I think it's a bullshit way they did that, where they put it behind a grind wall instead of just laying it out for you. That was another problem I had, was the episodic nature of it. It was just kind of, I felt it was kind of arbitrary. It didn't make a ton of sense why they did it that way. Like, it didn't justify itself. You know? It just felt awkward. And it made, like, it broke the story up in awkward ways, kind of, like, for no reason. It didn't feel pointed. It didn't feel like it was there for a good reason, like I said. But so the end of the game, the true ending, is, where you find out a lot of those fan theories and stuff like that were partially true. I did a video like a month or almost 2 months ago about fan theories and basically kind of focus on Yi Young and Python Silken HD. Python Silken HD was partially correct, which is kind of what I felt like I was on, partially correct, right? They thought it was Gray Fox. You're going to be revealed to be Gray Fox and not Big Boss. Instead, you're the medic from Ground Zeroes that was in the helicopter with Paz and Chico and stuff like that. And now you've lost your memory, you've been in a coma for 9 years, and you are taking the place of Big Boss, so Big Boss can go run away and start building Outer Heaven, basically. And then you're there to keep his legend alive, to keep contributing to the reach, the perception of reach that Big Boss has, kind of further cementing him in legendary status. And the game pretty much foreshadows this for pretty strongly, actually. I mean, even in the opening moments where you are in a character creator screen and you enter your name and birth date, I was like, oh, it's telling me I'm not Big Boss. It's telling me that. Especially the thing that actually really drove that home for me was the mission where you go get Huey Emmerich and you go to that base. It's right before you have your first interaction with the giant Metal Gear enemy, the Sahelanthropus. That's a mouthful. God damn you, Kojima. But yeah, so you engage with a mammal pod, which has it's an artificial intelligence based on the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3. And it basically talks to you, which was weird and not explained at all. But it basically talks to you and says, Snake? Wait, you're not him. And they just told you that you're not him. So I don't, some people, there seems to be a divisiveness, kind of a split in the community of people that like that. The idea that you weren't actually Big Boss, and people that were furious that you weren't Big Boss, because you're like, I didn't even get to see Big Boss's fall. That's the thing, though. It doesn't matter what Big Boss's fall is. You kind of know what it is just by his actions, and even having that, the doppelganger. You can kind of see his intentions. In a way, right? I didn't, it didn't spoil, and because I kind of, assumed that was what was going on anyways, so I guess maybe it just didn't come so far out of left field for me, and that might be because I checked out fan theories and stuff like that, so that's the thing, I don't know if I would have picked up on some of that stuff had I not had that, preconditioning to kind of think that way. So that's, an aspect. So I guess for me it didn't come out of left field. It kind of felt really appropriate. I mean, even the fucking David Bowie song, The Man Who Sold the World, is about not being yourself. About changing. I mean, there's different levels of that song. But, it's about kind of a doppelganger-esque subtext. That's kind of what that song is about. It's emotional doppelganger, though, not literal. So it's kind of in there. All throughout, even the trailers, everything. But the trailers kind of promised a much more exciting narrative, I guess, than we got. Put all the Big Boss stuff aside, the thing that I found was just really, really, unsatisfying was the first, basically, quest line, the first, storyline arc was the stuff with Skullface, Philanthropist, and what, this infection is, and how that's going to, affect things. Kind of big, Skullface's plan, basically. I didn't think it did a very good job of kind of telling that story. It felt really almost rushed in a weird way, because I beat the game, and then I went back, and I watched, some people, are putting out the movie versions of it. So I watched all the cutscenes, and listened to a bunch of the cassette tapes again, and all that stuff, and especially when you watch it condensed, it really lacks impact, I guess. It's not. It just feels underdeveloped, basically. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and they talk about a lot of stuff, but they don't really delve into it too much. And even at the end, it's like you bump into like Skullface a few times throughout the missions and like throughout the narrative and the like for the first 31 missions, but you kind of just do that, and then you bump into him, and then you run away. You bump into him, you run away, and then at like the last confrontation, like you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna get in a truck with him, and we go on this ride, and he monologues at you for 10 minutes. Then you sit in awkward silence for 10 minutes, and then that's like the end of his character arc, basically. It doesn't like kind of, you're not, like I said, it's like about like kind of the mystery aspect of it, like what is Skullface's like ultimate ends, and like what does he actually want to achieve and stuff like that. Like it's never really dealt with in a way that I feel like is easily understandable until he just tells you, like Bond villainy level, like I'm just gonna lay out my plan for no reason. I mean, I guess for Skullface it's about gloating or whatever. And that was another disappointing aspect. Like, Skullface is just a boring villain. Just really kind of stayed. And that's like a problem. Not a problem, right? I guess it's not a problem. Because if they had done this and they had just done a better job, I wouldn't care. But, like, not having that eclectic, like, group of, like, bosses and all that stuff kind of is disappointing. Because it just doesn't... There's no variety, there's nothing exciting about it, there's nothing interesting about a lot of the characters. Even the characters you already know, like Ocelot and Kaz. Kaz has a decent character arc. Ocelot, I guess you have to just take from what you know of the older stories and kind of infer things about his loyalty and where his loyalties lie and stuff like that. And, like, you know, because he's, again, once it's revealed at the end of the game, Ocelot's the one that knows what's going on. He's you know, complicit with the actual Big Boss's plans. But, actually, Huey Emmerich is probably one of the more interesting characters, because he has kind of a dark... there's a dark turn there. There's, like, this kind of a... I don't know, opportunistic type of sliminess about him that you're never really, you know, can get behind, but it's never really fully explored, like, kind of where he's coming from, or, like, why he would feel the way he does, or why he's done some of the things that he's done, like, in the 9 years that, like, the characters were in comas that, like, the game jumps over. It's never really, I don't know, like, explored in a way that, like, makes his character very strong. It's kind of, like, falls into this trap of, like, you know this about the characters because we're just directly telling you, rather than, like, showing me. Which is it's something in storytelling in general that I don't like. So I just think there was some poor characterization going on. And that goes all the way to, you know, Venom Snake himself. He's an empty vessel. Kiefer Sutherland is Kiefer Sutherland. Basically, I don't think he does a bad job. I also just don't think he does a great job. Now, I don't know if that has to do with, like... You know, people have surmised that, like, well, maybe they just couldn't get him for long periods of time, so they had to cut a bunch of the script out. But he is fucking quiet as fuck. That guy barely says anything. I mean, like, during big dramatic stuff, he's like, takes a back seat to everything. Which, in a way, right, like, meta-narratively, it makes sense. It makes sense for him to be like that because he's not actually Big Boss. So he should be a different character, technically. And... it does, so in that sense, it works. It works, kind of, if you look at it from that perspective. Because he is a different character. This is not the Snake that we know and love, I guess. And maybe, like, and that's even, like, a decent reason why Kiefer Sutherland was cast. I think, like, the biggest misstep was that not having... I don't know how they would have done this, honestly. Because of, like, in the beginning, when you're with... Ishmael, like the guy that helps you get out of the hospital, which at the end of the game is revealed to be the real Big Boss. Like, you know, Kiefer did both the voices for those, so I was kind of like, you know, because it would have been a nice little reveal if David Hayter had, like, been the voice of Big Boss, just to give it a juxtaposition, like, give it some variety, and also just make the casting decision of Kiefer Sutherland make more sense, because he's not supposed to be the same person, technically. He's you. He's the player avatar. In a way that, like, those games have never done that before. Like, you've never had, like, the empty vessel player avatar. You've always been either Big Boss or Solid Snake. And they have very specific character traits and characterizations and the way about going about things, and they talk a lot and blah blah blah. This guy not so much. And you even see that, like, you know, in the kind of the periphery of the story, that like Venom Snake is being led around and told what to do. He's not very proactive, honestly. It's always at the insistence of somebody else that he does what he does. It's never like his decision, almost. Even when it comes to things like the Quiet storyline, it's not even really his idea. He doesn't really know anything about Quiet. He's just told about her. And when you stumble upon her, and then Kaz wants you to kill her, Ocelot doesn't. It's never really fleshed out why that is, other than like Ocelot feels like for a good tactical reason. And that's just the sparseness of the story just doesn't allow for much depth. And it kind of bummed me out. It bummed me out as like, that's why I kind of like these games. I know they're silly and stuff, but there's a lot of like deep characterizations. There's a lot of good subtext in these stories. And while this game does have, like, it does actually, the themes and the subtext of the story is fantastic. I love what they did. Especially, it's such a unique take on a virus or whatever you want to call it, like an infection, like this thing about destroying language and wiping out certain languages and stuff like that, and how that is just kind of, it ties in nicely with the idea of the Patriot AI and what they're trying to do and how they want to control information. It's kind of a different version of that. And it just drives home the importance of language to people, not just for communication purposes, but for how they identify as like a nation or a people. Like it's the great divider is language barriers. You know, because in a world of chaos and confusion, if you can't understand each other, you're never going to be able to come to any kind of understanding. And you're never going to be able to progress and make things better. You're never going to be able to work together if you literally cannot understand each other. Which, you know, it doesn't go as deep as I would have liked, but like, you know, it's there, and I really like that aspect of it. I thought that was great. Like and I wish there was just more meat on those bones. You know, I wish it had gone into it more. I wish there was the proselytizing that the series is known for. Now let's just talk about it. I don't care. Like, give me a half-hour cutscene where Ocelot and Kaz are interrogating somebody, and we're talking about these lofty terms and lofty ideas and philosophical leanings and different ideologies. Like, why couldn't they do that? Like, it goes back to what I said. I feel like it's really reactionary to just the criticism the series has always fallen under, and that just bugged me as a fan. It bugged me as a fan of the series. You know, God, it's so like, I was actually like upset. I wasn't upset at the story. I was upset how it was told, and I cannot remember the last time like something like that like actually made me legitimately like, oh fuck, it like ruined my day. I beat it in like one afternoon, and I was just like, that fucking sucked. That sucked the way they did that. I didn't like it. And like I said before, like the piecemeal nature of it is like you can miss entire things, entire arcs. Like if you don't engage in enough side ops, you don't go off the beaten track enough, you don't return to Mother Base enough, you're gonna miss a bunch of stuff with the child soldiers and Eli, Liquid Snake, future Liquid Snake. You're gonna miss tons of stuff that is actually pretty imperative to that story. Like it's very important. It's important not just for the immediate story being told, but it's important for just the larger arc and the universe and what this game is supposed to be in terms of like filling in some of that last bit of information, so everything comes full circle. And add insult to injury, they actually cut out the last mission of the game, which is you would have had a final confrontation with Eli, and it would have kind of, you know, delved into things further. Eli gets draws the short stick. So does Psycho Mantis. So does the fire guy, which you find out is Colonel Volgan from Metal Gear Solid 3. Like nothing about them is really explored. There's some cassette tapes that gives you some kind of vague inklings about stuff, but it's not enough. Like I never gave a shit about what they were doing or why they were doing it. I guess I was supposed to kind of infer things because I knew of the other games, but somebody like Psycho Mantis it's not his origin story. He's like a Deus Ex Machina. He's just like a tool like that's used to just fuck things up. And it doesn't ever feel like there's no motivation for him to do so, other than the fact like he just feeds off of people's hatred and need for revenge. That's it. That's the explanation. Colonel Volgin doesn't even really get like anything. He's just saying, well, Psycho Man just found him, and he was full of hate and piss and vinegar. So he was just like, well, I'm gonna work with this dude. I'm gonna like mind control this guy. He's gonna become the fire guy. And even like the conclusion of Colonel Volgin's character is like so dumb. Like when you go to recover his body and he wakes up and then he just kind of like passes out, and that's when it's revealed he's Colonel Volgin, because I guess that was supposed to be a reveal. It was supposed to be a big fucking surprise. It was just nonsense, and not in the good way, not in the Metal Gear way. Because if anything, Metal Gear has always gone to great lengths to let you know where everybody is coming from. So when this game kind of full stop doesn't do any of that, really aggravating. Because it's these stories, even this story, even the way it's told, like, is a problem. But like the story itself is dealing with kind of grander ideas, grander things, and it needs like more investigation, I suppose. It needs more information. It needs to be fleshed out, I think, better, honestly. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm still, like, so up in the air about it. Like, I just, like, go back and forth. Like, there's things about it I really love, and there's things about it I can't stand. It sucked that it took, like, 60 hours to, like, get through the story, which may seem odd to some people, but, like, having it broken up, like I said in my review, like, the pace of the game is driven by the gameplay, which is a good thing. It's a video game. It should do that. But, like, not being able to, like, not breaking up that pace or the tension or having cutscenes contribute to the pace. Like, the cutscenes full stop just stop the game. Stops the momentum. I never felt that way in the other games. And maybe that's just me. I don't know. That's just my opinion on it. Like, I always thought, like, the cutscenes and the codec calls, they all added to the pace of the game and what I was doing and made me care and kind of even built momentum as the story went on. This doesn't. And a lot of that has to do with, like, the ways, like I said, like I keep saying, it's the way it's told. Like, the arbitrary episodic nature of it, the lack of, like, organic integration of, like, the cassette tape codec calls, the kind of short nature of the cutscenes themselves. Like, there's not a lot of information given. Like, there's not a lot even, like, going on in them, for the most part. And most of them are boring. And they don't tell you that much. I'll be honest with you. They don't tell you that much. You know, like I said in my review, like, Ground Zeroes felt like much more like classic Metal Gear. And because there's, like, you know, half hour worth of cutscenes, 45 minutes worth of cutscenes and cassettes to listen to, and that's wrapped in about an hour and a half experience. So that feels like Metal Gear storytelling. Same thing in the first few hours of this game feel the same way. So from, you know, the first, like, chapter or whatever, when you're in the hospital getting out, to about an hour or so after that, you feel like you're playing a Metal Gear game. And then nothing happens for me, it was like 13, 14 hours. Nothing of consequence. You know, I'm running around, and I understand, like, the idea of it, like, because this is, well, not narratively, but, well, narratively it is, but also mechanically. It's like a sequel to Peace Walker. I didn't mention that in my review for some reason. I don't know why. It's Peace Walker 2. But even Peace Walker, a fucking PSP game, had, like, a very thorough story. Very thorough. You knew what the fuck was going on. You knew what everybody was trying to do. You knew what everybody wanted. And not to say that you can't leave mystery or something up to the audience's imagination, but it's just, like, they don't do that. That's not what it is. There are arcs. They're just, like, everything feels rushed to a certain point. It's, like, feels very lackadaisical, and then you get, like, your last cutscene with that person, and it's really, like, dramatic and rushed, and they just end it. Like, I don't know. So I found it just really frustrating. Like, the second half it's even more, like, disjointed and almost incoherent than the first half of the game. or the, whatever, I don't know. They broke it up into like chapter 1 or chapter 2 for arbitrary reasons. Like, I don't understand why, like, this entire narrative was not built, like, clearly. Why is that, like, a separate thing? I mean, I guess there's this aspect of, like, well, you're engaging with, like, what it's like to be Big Boss after, you have the normal Metal Gear threat, which is Skullface and Sahelanthropus, like, the big mech, and then after that, you get to see what life's like for Venom Snake, Big Boss, whatever, after that. Like, he still has to go on, he's still building his army, he's still building his base. There's these other things that happen that also affect. I didn't like that. Like, I kind of wish it was just one big story, and using Eli and Skullface, like, in interesting ways together, and building on each other, and, like, having some more clear motivations, like, just having a better understanding of where everybody's coming from and why they're doing everything. I mean, you even have stuff like the Psycho Mantis character during Skullface's death scene or whatever, like, you find out that there's a missing vial of the virus, and for some reason Psycho Mantis pops up in the background and steals it. Like, why would Psycho Mantis do that? Like, if he's completely driven by, like, kind of the emotional impulses of people, why would he, like, have this in his back pocket to fucking give to Eli or whatever? They don't ever even, like, it's just, they don't go there. And I found it really unfortunate. I was really bummed by the whole thing. Because I felt like there could have been some really great opportunities. I mean, the trailers, like, sell you an experience like you almost don't get. Like a story that you don't get. It looks like all these things are connected. Which, this is obviously, all this is just my crazy opinion. This is just my bullshit. I fully accept that. I get it, okay? I'm just venting. I felt like coming on camera and venting about this fucking shit. Because it's like, that's the most frustrating thing to me. It's like, you can see the potential. There's things about it I really like. I really like the themes. I really like the subtext. I even loved, like, the meta commentary at the end of the game. When you have, during the true ending, at the very end, when he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's listening to the tape from Big Boss, the real Big Boss, kind of being like, oh, now you know you're not really blah, blah, blah. But I mean, they don't even build up to that in a way that feels like, I don't know, good? Like, it just comes out of fucking left field. Like, and then you just play the hospital mission. It's just, I don't get it. Like, I don't get why, like, that was considered, like, the good way to go, I guess. I don't know. Like, that just didn't even build up very well. It just didn't build up to that way very well. And part of that is the episodic weird bullshit, the disconnected things. It's just like, weren't all these things just connected and then building off of each other? Like, I guess like the older games, I guess. But this is great. Like, I really love the message at the end of the game. It was basically Kojima's kind of love letter to the players of the game. This is like a meta textual thing. Was that you are Big Boss just as much as Big Boss is Big Boss, because you control Big Boss. You were the player. So you contribute to his legends just as much as the idea of the character did. So I thought that it was a nice little crescendo at the end there. That was nice. It tied that aspect of, like, the fact that you're not Big Boss together pretty well. Like, that made that fall into place in a way that makes sense. Also makes sense just for the larger, broader story as well, because if you play Metal Gear Solid 4, he's not dead. He didn't die in the first Metal Gear game. So that gives kind of a narrative reason, not just like crazy comic book shit where it's like, nobody really dies. No, like, when you're Solid Snake and you're playing the first Metal Gear, that's who you're fighting, is that guy. You're fighting Venom Snake, not actually Big Boss. So yeah, I don't know, like, I like it in some ways, and I'm just so fucking disappointed in other ways. And it's like, it sounds so bizarre, but, like, I'm just having a hard time, like, coming to terms with how I feel about it. I just wish it was more I wish they did more interesting things with the stuff that was there. We spend most of our time, like, in this game doing shit that just doesn't matter. Which I guess is that partially because of like this open world tact that they took with it? Is that what like is that the actual problem? Like, I don't know. I mean, like, how else could they tell the story? I mean, I think other open world games have done it. Like I said, like Shadow of Mordor and Far Cry. I mean, those stories are not as complicated. There's not as many characters. It's mostly just you're just dealing with fodder. But this game just, I don't know. I guess that's just like the thing. It's just like it is a fantastic game and a mediocre Metal Gear game. Because it isn't all bad, but it ain't all good either. What do I even say? What do I say now? What do I do now? What do I do? I was so excited for this game. I am excited. Like, it's a good game. I've never had like such a weird mindfuck of a thing where it's just like the game is so good. It is so much fun. But I am so frustrated with how they told that story. So fucking frustrated. It doesn't retroactively hurt it. Like, I can't wait like to go and play it later tonight. I can't wait. I can't wait to go back and just fuck around and start getting into the online stuff and the attacking other people's bases and stealing their supplies. I'm super excited to start doing that kind of stuff because I pretty much played the whole game not connected to the servers, so I didn't want to be fucked with. I wanted to have my experience. But yeah, I wish they just built that conclusion in just a more pointed way. I suppose that's really the crux of it, and I wish it just built better off of itself. It feels like a really disjointed season of television. You know, like that doesn't clearly. It's like, actually no. It feels like a season or 2 seasons of TV where there's just episodes missing. That's what it feels like, and then you're kind of just like, what's going on. Like, it's not like you're ever confused about the story, but like in terms of plot. But like everything else, you're just like, why do I care about any of this? Like, why is this person doing this? Like, I know you're telling me they're doing it, and you're telling me, you're implying this and that, or like I'm supposed to take things from what I know about the series into it. Like, I guess, but it just doesn't like inform what they're doing. You know what I mean? There's a serious problem with character motivation in this game, in this story, the game's story. This is a serious, and that's the most important part of characters. As like an amateur writer, as just a fan of stories and movies and books and all that stuff, storytelling in games, most important thing for a character is is asking why. You have to be able to answer that question, I think, for successful characterization. Doesn't need to be the most clear answer in the world, but you have to have something. There has to be, like almost like if we were in a courtroom, it has to be you have to have, like, beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, okay, I can kind of understand where this person's coming from. That's probably why they're doing what they're doing, good or bad. I mean, because even, like, your character, like I said, yourself, like, Venom Snake is not really a character. Like, he's supposed to be the player avatar, which I can accept. I can accept after the fact, in hindsight, I suppose. Just, like, calm down a little bit. God, I'm just kind of raving over here. But he's not a character. Even, like, Kazuri Miller is probably the most fleshed out character in terms of you understand what he's about and you understand most of his motivation. I would say that. Ocelot, I guess you can kind of infer because he's who he's really working for. But it made him boring because they didn't do anything with him. He doesn't break status quo. He doesn't even really get into torturing people, which is something like he's supposed to become like the great sadist. And this would be the time period that he would become the great sadist. So it doesn't even really have hints of that. Like, I like Troy Baker a lot, and he does the voice of Ocelot. Like, he's a really good voice actor, and it's not his fault. Like, but like it's just boring. I was just bored, which I was really surprised because Ocelot's always been kind of a high point for me with the games. I always enjoyed Ocelot. He's fucking crazy, and that's why I like him. So I'd like to see him at least show me some of that darkness, because he just seems like the most reasonable, nice dude in the world in this game. He does. Like, Kaz is the one that seems fucking crazy. He seems like he would become, like, a warmongering torture fetishist. Not Ocelot. Maybe that's another twist. Find out that Kaz is actually Ocelot. No, not really. But, like, you know, just like, fucking frustrate the fuck out of me. Like, Quiet as a character, okay, from everything. You know, there was a controversy behind her when she was revealed, just because of the way she looked. And I guess you can, you know, and I accept the argument. People think, like, it's a little much, like, in terms of objectification and whatnot. Like, I get it. I get where people are coming from. I don't think it's as big a deal as some people do, but I get where you're coming from. But the thing is, they kind of justify it in a smarter way than you would think. There's like a subtextual element to that character. But if you don't play the game a certain way, you'll never fucking know it. You will never see that shit. And that's a problem. The arc of her character, there's videos online and stuff. You can go watch, like, basically her arc for the most part. Like, you can go watch, and it's like a little over an hour, I think. Because I've gone through and I've watched, like, a lot of the videos, a lot of the story again after I beat the game, because I'm just trying to get a better grasp on it. I'm like, did I miss something? Did I not do shit? And I missed a lot of the Quiet stuff. I mean, I got, like, the ending, I completed her arc, but I missed some of the stuff in between. I missed her kind of building a relationship with Venom Snake, like, and what that means and how that impacts her final scene, in terms of she sacrifices herself, basically, for Venom Snake, because there's a respect, there's kind of an affection for each other that they're slowly developing as the game goes on. But if you don't interact with her enough, and if you don't take her on enough missions, like, you're not going to see a lot of, like, these, basically the video clips or the movie scenes or whatever, the cinematics. And it makes her character seem like just a gross, gross is a little strong word, but it just makes her seem like just this over-sexualized, silent character. Which, much to the difference of the reality of it. I mean, the reality of the situation is, like, in my opinion, this is my opinion, you know, like, you find out in the story that, like, she breathes through her skin, and a lot of that has to do with her being burnt up in the beginning of the game, when she comes to kill Snake in the beginning, and she goes under this, like, this virus therapy, and she breathes through her skin. It's much like a flower. It's like a form of photosynthesis. She breathes through her skin. She also, like, ingests water through her skin. She absorbs it, and all this stuff. But you don't realize until, like, the end of her arc that, like, I mean, there's the, like, thematic irony, I suppose, in the fact that she's almost naked, but she's a sniper. So there's this idea that, like, she's in the most vulnerable state a person can be in, which is almost naked. And snipers are all about invulnerability. They're all about being hidden. They're all about, like, not in the context of the story, like, you could say the snipers are about shame in a way, hiding yourself, nobody's seeing you, blending in. But Quiet's not like that. Quiet is always exposed. Like, and that's, you know, and there's an emotional reality to that, like, in terms of what her character goes through in the story. And then there's also just, like, the juxtaposition of that. And I mean, I don't know if I should have wrote that, because I gotta write this. I'm probably gonna write this. So you're hearing me spitballing how I'm gonna write it. But so there's some depth there to her character, but it's very easy to miss all that stuff. Like, it's also about like her using kind of that objectification, that sexualization against her enemies. You know, it's about like just like people being distracted by the fact that she's half naked. At the completion of her arc, they basically imply that she's about to be raped, because what happens when she is covered, when her skin is covered, basically, like, she loses her powers, basically. So she's about to be raped, and, like, this dude's, like, dunking her in the water, and he pulls off her pants, because they have her in, like, kind of prison gear, prison outfit. He pulls off her pants. And then once he does that, he unleashes Quiet. Like, Quiet fucking kills everybody. Because it's like taking the power back. It's about owning like your body and who you are, and like almost like weaponizing your sexuality to a certain degree. And you've seen that in other, and that's what Sniper Wolf is very similar to that. So there's some crossover there. Sniper Wolf's very similar to that. Like, and that's why she's like a sex pot kind of character, but there's like rational reasons for that. Like, and I don't know if that's the intention, honestly. I think with Quiet it is. I think it's really obvious that's what it is, in my opinion, from viewing the tapes. From looking through the story, like, I think that's how you're supposed to view her in some respects. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. I think people are really, really, like, misguided in the way they talk about Quiet on a very superficial level. And then they don't really talk about her in with any kind of nuance or subtlety. They just look at, like, oh, boob physics. And it's just, it's like the death of fucking criticism, the death of, just these bizarre fucking articles you read and stuff like that, where it's just like, did you even, like, think about this? Or you just, like, everything's so surface level. It's so frustrating. It's so goddamn frustrating. And that's a lot of the criticism I always hear levied against, like, Quiet and characters like Quiet, like Bayonetta or something like that. People just completely misunderstanding, like, human sexuality, or rejecting it, and wanting people to be like these asexual creatures, like a completely sanitized world. But anyways, there's also, you can miss an entire through line that ends up kind of not mattering, but it's also something that, like, also foreshadows the fact that you're not Big Boss, and that is, you can find Paz, character that we thought was dead, which ends up, she is dead. You're having, like, I guess, hallucinations? I'm not sure. It's not very clear whether she's really there or not. I mean, you have conversations with other people about her, like, while you're in the room. But what I thought they were going to do with the Paz character, I kind of theorized, was that she was part of a cloning program, and that was supposed to, thought maybe you would find out that you're a clone or something, like, before you just find out you're a doppelganger. I kind of was like, oh, maybe that's you're a clone. And I thought maybe Paz being there looking just like she did in Peace Walker. She doesn't look like she did in Ground Zeroes, because obviously she was like a prisoner of war in a POW camp. But she looks like the idealized Paz, and she has, like, a medical scar and from Ground Zeroes, so there's still that kind of attachment to the reality. It wasn't very clear whether that really happens or not. I don't know if it did. I don't know if that's actually real. But you could totally miss her. You could not even see any of that stuff. And while that stuff's not, like, plot critical, then why was it in the fucking trailer? Like, if it was supposed to be, like, an Easter egg, then that doesn't really matter. Why put it in the trailer? I'm just saying. It's very misleading. Which is fine. That's what Kojima does. And that's another reason why I don't understand people's surprise that you weren't Big Boss. This is a Hideo Kojima game. What did you think? It was never going to be straightforward. There was always going to be some crazy twist. I think we all knew that. And based on, like, how things play out, like, in terms of, like I said, at the beginning of the game in the hospital, when you're, like, you get to, like, pick a face and stuff, which everybody assumed, like, oh, that's going to be my online avatar. But it's, which it is, but it's also there for the meta-narrative of the game, or the actual narrative of the game, that you're not actually Solid Snake. Or not Solid Snake. Big Boss. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about this forever, honestly. I feel like I'm kind of going in circles. But, like, I'm probably, I'm going to do... I want to write about Quiet, because I don't think anybody's going to take the tact or take my ideas and, like, kind of do anything with them. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I think just, like, it's just a superficial reading of the character, and it's just kind of it's disappointing to see that in, like a quote-unquote critical community, because you're supposed to kind of look at things critically and examine them and, pay attention to shit, and not just see what you want out of something. That's just one of those examples of, like, this incredible, like, confirmation bias type stuff that you hear a lot. People made their minds up about Quiet, like, when she was revealed. And now that they have the game in front of them, I doubt their opinion's going to change, because that's all they're going to see is the admittedly goofy, weird, like, Kojima, like, objectification stuff. I mean, I even hear people talking about, like, well, you can zoom in on her boobs and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you can zoom in on anything. Like, that doesn't fucking matter. It says a lot more about you than it does about the game. Like, to me, that's always kind of the crux of a lot of these things, a lot of these arguments, is that, like, it usually says more about your perspective than it does on, like, anybody else's. Especially in an interactive medium, where you have choice about how you approach things and what you do. But anyways, that's my 2 cents on the story, or my 45 minutes of sense on the story. I would love to hear what people think about it. I apologize, I'm kind of rambling, but whatever, who gives a shit? Fucking 20 people are going to watch this. So thank you, 20 people. I appreciate it. Yeah, but yeah, if you guys have any other theories or further thoughts, I'd love to talk in the comments. Maybe if I get enough comments, I'll do another video and we can talk about it some more. Because I love talking about Metal Gear Solid, and I wish I had people to talk about it with. I don't. Not in my immediate life, anyways. So, thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Shaun, and I will talk to you next time I got something to talk about.